in the military, you're not allowed to actually, share knowledge whatsoever. Where I find Atlassian and the community, it's all about sharing knowledge. It's all about, you know, trying to help other people.
In these 20-ish years, did you ever imagine that you'd be at this level of involvement and this level of certification and being a leader and putting this much of a dent in the Atlassian community?
My Atlassian exposure has gone through the roof in the last 12 months.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian. Today we're on the other side of the world with Mark Higgins in Sydney. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Alex. It's good to catch up again.
So as I mentioned during our little pre-talk, I don't know a whole lot about you. And so why don't we start off at the beginning and why don't you tell me who you are? What do you do?
Sure. Look, I'm an ITSM consultant with a company called Glintech here in Sydney. I've only been an ITSM consultant for 12 months, actually. 12 months yesterday was my first year anniversary. And it's sort of a second career for me, as I've been in IT for nearly 40 years, way back last century. I started in 1984, I think, the year after the PC was invented. I was a programmer, and then I became a database administrator, and then I got bumped onto team leader, application manager. The last thing I ended up was I was an IT manager for the back office for a bank here, a local bank here in Australia, and so operations 24/7, payment systems, home loans. I know everything about an Australian home loan, and yeah, that sort of I was basically made redundant 12, 12 months and 2 weeks ago, and through my community involvement since 2019. I reached out to a few people in the industry that I've known over 5 or 6 years, and see if they wanted to hire me, basically. And yeah, fortunately, one of them said yes, and so they retrained me to a certain extent. I passed the this 420, the 520, the 620, and the 120, all in the spirit of about 7 months.
You just got them all in one shot then.
I got them all in one shot because it'd literally been 20 years since I'd actually studied for anything. And I think the last certification that I received was something called a Sybase Database Administrator certification. And so that was in the 90s. And so it'd been a long time since I'd actually had to study and to get certified. So once I was on a roll, I just thought, well, and because Atlassian were actually going to change their certification and they're going to get rid of the jackets, I thought, well, here's a good time to lock it all up, and I did.
So walk me through that process a little bit more. Out of all those certifications, which one did you think was the easiest?
The 520.
520, okay. Which one do you think was the hardest?
Probably the 420 JSM. The what is it? So the 620 is, I always get those two. The 620 is the Jira project admin, and the 120 is the Jira administration. And there's a bit of overlap in that space, and that you could sort of build on one from the other. But JSM does have minor bits of overlap, but it's then a whole different area of things that you need to remember and focus, such as one of the last thing I studied was about the different languages that you can actually set up in, if you're French or German and things like that, you can set up inside JSM. And lo and behold, the very first question was on this guy who was German, and everything wasn't quite in German, and why was that? So that worked out really well.
Nice. And so again, going a little deeper here, from when you first jumped into Atlassian to when you took the certification, how much time elapsed there?
When I first jumped into Atlassian, back in my old life, we had Atlassian Jira on server.
But you were a user, not as an admin, or
exactly. No, I was the IT manager. We didn't really have a Jira admin. It was really Jira ended up in the business through the business, that the business went out and bought this thing called Jira, and we're in the IT department going, what the hell is this? And so we were only a small IT department, so we didn't have a Jira admin. there was only 200 people in the organization, so it wasn't like we were dealing with thousands of people. So I played around with Jira. I knew enough to be dangerous.
Aren't we all?
I built a workflow that just got stuck, disappeared, could never resolve anything, trying to be funny or funky, and then really when I started to learn, when I started working for Glintech and started being mentored by our trainer and sort of learnt where I'd gone wrong and why things were like they were, and that it wasn't a black box. It actually had value and meaning, and it was quite powerful. That worked out. It was revelation, really.
And so let me see if I'm so I'm grilling you here a little bit because one, I don't have all the certifications. I have the jacket, but I cheated. It was this whole I got invited to this back room type of situation, and there were boxes, and they were like, "What's your size?" And I got a box, or I got a shirt or a jacket, but I was told you can't put it on until you go to the mall. So I'm a horrible test taker. I document. I don't know if you saw my journey, but I documented my journey to get the 520, and right now I'm getting ready to either do the 120 or the 620. And so that's why I'm very curious, because I'm like, well, that means you kind of came back into the ecosystem just a year ago.
Yeah.
So within the last years when you did all this certification.
That's correct. Yeah.
But then if I'm also understanding it correctly, though, you're not an admin even today, right? You're
No.
Right. So, and these exams are very admin heavy. So that's giving me a lot of hope.
Absolutely. And look, I actually used a lot of your recordings to, especially things on permissions and stuff like that. And I would listen to them if I went driving or something or other. I'd listen to your podcast while I was studying. And my way of studying was basically to create mind maps of all the information that I believe would be in the exam, and then to remember sort of acronyms of all the different levels or permissions or Bros project and everything that's listed in that. So I sort of create a funny acronym so I remember, and that would sort of trigger my memory that this was part of that particular area of the permissions.
You're inspiring me to maybe just pull the gun on it and just try to take it, because
I definitely think you'd be fine, Alex. I really would. The funny thing is about when you actually do the exams and the extraordinary lengths that you have to go to show that there's nothing in your ear or under the table, or all the walls are blank, and that you're not secretly being watched by something. I mean, I find that quite funny to a certain extent.
Yeah,
and then when you're,
I just went straight to this testing site to avoid all that harassment.
all right. That's exactly right. And when you're in the exam, if you do this, if you go, they go, that's a warning. You can't put your hand over your mouth.
Oh man,
you can't even talk. Because you can't write anything down. There's no pens and paper, and I'm a very visual learner, and so I love to draw. I love to scribble. I love whiteboards, and you can't do that. It's like you sort of sit there with your hands clenched.
Quick, yeah. When I took the 520. I went in with an objective, right? I'm a C's get degrees kind of guy. And I was like, King Bob, Robert Wynn, he was like, you just need like 39 out of the 75 or whatever to pass. So when I went in, I took the test, just giving my gut answer for each one. Kind of just, I wouldn't say I sped through it, but I knew it was going to come back. So I didn't get hung up on any question. So I came back the second time and I basically retook the test. And I'm tallying up like how many in my gut. I'm like, this is 100%. There's no ounce of doubt in my mind. I give it a tally. So I'm like on the paper tallying up. I counted 39, hit submit.
I did something similar. I probably went through it 3 times, but exactly right. That's you don't get hung up doing, if you don't know something, you miss it, you go back. And I think the 520 was, as I said, it seemed to be the easiest. Like, it was 3 hours, and I think I was probably done in 90 minutes. We had a guy at work; he did the whole thing in about 25 minutes.
Yeah, I did it pretty quick. I was like, wait, this is too easy. Let me go back and do it again.
That's right. The 620 took well over 2 hours, and in the 420 it was like 2.5, 2 and 45 minutes, because I was doing exactly the same thing, thinking, these are correct. Therefore, I've got X out of Y, and the your heart in the mouth moment when you hit the submit button for the final time, you sort of go, "What did I get?"
Yeah, but it must be tough having it proctored in your house, right, where they're really strict about your environment. Because, like I said, I write too, and thinking out loud. Well, I mean, in the test facility, the only benefit I would see is the test facility that I went to. It was very distracting the way they just bring people in randomly.
All right, all right.
So you got people coming in, coming out. You got people coughing. You got people doing this, doing that. And I'm like the type of person where I'm reading a question, I almost need like dead silence just to read, because a fly passing by, I got to start all over.
Yeah, I went to the office in Sydney, and we have basically what we call the box, and the box is virtually a one-person meeting room, and it's specifically used for most people to take exams. You stick a thing on the wall, on the door, and say an exam in process. There's nothing on the wall. There's one table. There's one chair. That's it. And you take a laptop in, and away you go. So it's
It makes
it's
it a lot
ideal.
easier. Yeah, because
Yeah, it's ideal.
I heard that you got to kind of pan your camera around the room and stuff. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
boy, do
absolutely.
I have a lot of stuff.
Well, that's right. And also under the desk, you've got to pan your camera under the desk and under your chair. And it's just really, it's weird. It's just weird. But
Yeah,
the exams themselves,
I'll stick to the location physically. It adds a little bit to the nervousness, but I think it's not getting harassed is worth its weight in gold, I guess.
indeed,
So, so
indeed.
let's again, kind of piggybacking on the fact that, again, these certifications are very admin heavy, but that's not what you do in your day job. So why don't you kind of walk us a little bit about what you do for your day job today?
As an ITSM consultant, I spend most of my time with JSM. So we go visit clients, and we help them either stand up a fresh instance of Jira Service Manager, or we go in and correct what they've done, or we suggest that there's maybe a better way of doing this. But majority of the time is we go to client sites, whether it's small or large, and we literally try to correct them in the right way of doing things. So we build request types, obviously, for them. We build workflows if they're not wanting to use things straight out of the box. We do a lot of automation, which is really the bulk of the funky stuff, because we tend to always work in with premium and above, so we're always working with assets, and so that gives us the ability to, I guess, supercharge JSM to show people what you can do if you've got your assets sorted out. And that then allows you to do simple things like figure out whose laptop is whose, or who's an approver, and items like that. So really, we're going in and we're building JSM projects for them. Solutions, as we call them now, solutions. That's the buzzword this year.
So let's talk
Because
about assets a little bit. What do you think about assets? Without
I,
getting fired, without getting fired, of course.
Yeah. Oh no, look, I'm a big fan of assets. Yes, it could be better, but however, it allows you to, I guess, put put anything really in your, say it's a database of anything, and I've used it for, the simple basic stuff is, yes, we stick a list of all your people in assets. We link it with the Atlassian ID. We can then link the hardware assets, and that's the simple stuff. So we know who owns what laptop. But then I've also used it for even governance. I've worked in working on setting up a governance structure. So you've got literally key controls, which is things that auditors like that are linked to ISO 27001 or PCI SS and items like this. And so you can literally link a control or an audit finding. And so, for example, incident management. So basically, in incident management, you want to make sure that your incident management procedure is working for you. And So you can use assets to automate self-assessment. So basically you can say, okay, so incident management control is you need to go check your incidents every 30 days and make sure you're doing it correctly. So you do like these mini self-assessments. And so that incident management control, that links to ISO 27001 16.2, at least links to SOC 3.6, it links to SOC 2 20, whatever. And so you can link the particular frameworks back to something which is just like an incident control, and then you can run an automation which says, okay, every month we're going to go pick 10% of our incidents and we're going to check to see whether we're doing them properly. So things like that. So that's a self-assessment, and using assets you can then be proactive so when auditors turn up, you go, okay, well, here are all the little self-assessments that we've done every 12 months. So rather than normally, in the old days when we used to do it, auditors would turn up and they go, give me a list of your last 12 months of assets, 12 months of incidents. And you'd go through and you'd find gaps that you hadn't done things correctly. Doing small self-assessments, you can close those gaps. Using assets, you can actually link a control to, say, if the auditor comes in and say, well, Matt, I want to see how you're working on ISO 27001 6.2. So you can actually link 6.2 to a control you've got, and then you can basically make that happen.
Yeah, it's super powerful, but it's one of those things where like you can get writer's block real quick.
You
like if you're just staring at a blank canvas of like the art of the possible, you're like, well, all of it's possible.
Yeah, that's true. So that's why we turn up. We spend a lot of time with assets. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to do things.
Better you than me, Mark. Better you than me.
Yeah, look, it could be better. We're always a bit puzzled as to why sort of the Atlassian users that are in your site aren't easily obtainable inside of assets.
Right.
That's a frustrating thing for us, and we basically then have to we mimic that, and to mimic it, you've got you load up the people in
but
assets.
Now you duplicated your data.
You duplicate your data, and then you got to keep maintaining your data because there's just no link. So if I had one wish list, it would be that Atlassian would make that data available in assets, so we didn't have to duplicate it.
Especially since like a lot of companies do just automatically port all their users in as customers. Not everybody gets a Jira agent license or a Confluence license or a Jira software, but most of the teams that I work with, like they'll just automatically everybody's a customer, so that when you're running your ITSM project, like anybody can submit the request without having to go through this whole process. So you already should, right? Big should have all the users in there. It's just a matter of somebody at Atlassian.
Yeah, it needs to make that happen.
I'm assuming you weren't around for the great debacle of 22, right?
Not as a consultant. No, I may have been a user.
Did you hear about? Were you impacted?
Was that when they deleted something? When they deleted a whole bunch of crap?
Yeah, the assets specifically went down and deleted a lot of JSMs for people. And that was an interesting phenomenon. I think if memory serves correctly, it was right during the Atlassian team conference. So
really?
As they were doing the keynote, news were breaking out that Atlassian's instances of Jira were just poof, gone.
Just dropping. Yeah, now I'm disclaimer too. My son actually works for Atlassian, and he has now for 8 years. But he's an architect. He's working on Loom at the moment, Loom and Confluence. But when things like that happen, I just sort of message him going, "No, what?" And he goes, "Yeah, can't talk right now, a little busy."
I was going to ask you, so pivoting a little bit. So you, like me, have one of those on your wall, I was assuming somewhere, right?
I do. It's here. Yep.
You got it handy.
That's right.
Why don't you walk me through that night? What was going through your head? Did anybody drop any hints? Were you aware that this was coming? What was that like?
It was explained to me like I was nominated, and because I was nominated, because I live in Sydney, Atlassian were paying for my airfare and my accommodation, which was tremendous because no one's ever paid for my airfare or my accommodation. And so At that point I'd already won to my extent, and then
Right, yeah.
and then
I got
in
a similar notification as well, but I was like, by that point, I had already worked out sponsorship deals, so I was
you
ready
were
to
covered.
go.
Yeah. So yeah, and when they brought us into the dinner, and I said, I forget it was, it might have been Stephanie or someone grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "No, you're sitting on this table here," you know. And I'm looking around at the table, and you're there, and there are all these other people. I think, okay, so this is real. This looks like this is it, and that's it. Still did it. It didn't really drop till the first person won the award that was from our table, and then it
It
sort
was
of.
it was a crazy night. It was one that definitely for the although I didn't go above and beyond like you. Did you get like an autograph?
Yeah, I did. So okay, so this is this is basically a Sage Sydney Rabbitohs hat, and I knew Mike would. But I figured Mike Cannon Brooks would be there, and I've been a Bunny supporter for 50 years, and Mike owns 25% of the Sage Sydney Rabbitohs, and so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to take the opportunity. I'm going to ask him if he'd mind signing my hat, and he did. Yeah, it says oldest, proudest Lotus, MCB, and that's basically our sort of motto of the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So yeah, that's my second prize possession from from the night. It's just
You would think you'd have these like a little bit more like glassed up and
no,
manicured.
you're right. Yeah, I like to still. I haven't worn that since he signed it. But you're right. I probably should go in a glass box and sit on my wall for sure. But it was a wonderful night. The community do a really good job of that type of thing. They make you feel welcome. They make you feel valued, and it really was a great 3 days really.
Now, walk me through. So, what was your award for?
Well, they call it change maker. No, I'm not quite sure. And many people have asked me this, Alex. What's a change maker? And I
And
have
I'm
to
not trying
be
to
honest with
challenge your award. There was
you.
so
No,
much happening that night that I have no idea what happened that night. Like I
yeah,
was
no.
starstruck. So I didn't eat. I couldn't tell you any of the food that we had that night. I couldn't tell you the dessert. I heard there was amazing dessert.
It was
Nothing.
amazing food,
Yeah, it was, but
but
I was in this state of just disbelief that whole night for me was the most surreal, magical night. But it's all like a weird twinkle.
I was trying not to, like, I enjoy red wine, and it was, the guy kept pouring. I just went, stop, stop, because if I actually have to win and say something, I don't want to have had too much red wine. So I believe the reason for the award was really about the work that I've done since 2019 when I joined the Atlassian community leadership team back in 2019, which was just before COVID. And there was a wonderful woman, Yavanka, and she was all by herself. And the events were held in Sydney. You'd get sort of 25 people turning up at most, um, and they really were. Um, they weren't they weren't big and glossy and things like that, but they were happening. And so I joined in 2019, and then COVID hit, and so we struggled through COVID. I mean, the last thing you community people want to do at the end of a day is sit through another Zoom meeting, and so but we put through COVID. But once COVID restrictions were, I won't say COVID disappeared because it hasn't, but once the COVID restrictions were released and we actually got back going face to face, we can actually then build up the community. And so, really, the award was for that change of 20 people to 200 people, and that and we're fortunate in Sydney. Like we're Sydney, we're Atlassian. I mean,
That's what I was
we
gonna
can
say.
get
Like that's the part that's blowing my mind because I would think that there's like 2,000 people.
There are 2,000 people in the charter, absolutely, except you won't get 2,000 people from Sydney turning up. We're
Why do you
very
think that
much
is?
Sydney siders are good at RSVPing, but we're not good when it's free. And it's not just Atlassian communities; it's any free event. Any free event, you find that and we have basically a 60% rule that from if you get 200 people RSVPing, you get 120 people who show. That's what we say because it could be anything. I mean, Sydney has great weather, and then sometimes there are storms, storms that just rock, and people just won't go out, and so it's really it's just the way Sydney people are. It's just it's not the easiest place to get to if you're not actually in, because previously people were in the office, and so they were in the city, and so therefore going to an Atlassian event was easy because it was just in George Street, it was just down the road, and so I could go after work. You're working from home, then yeah, it could be it could be 30 minutes, could be an hour on train into the city, 2 hour event, an hour train home. So that really um, has an impact. But the good thing at the moment, though, is that we've really got momentum, and I think that's really what the award was for. Because again, being in Sydney, we've got access now to level 29, which is if you're ever in Sydney, I'd love to take you up there. It's a really wonderful setup. It's and then you've got the Atlassian superstars are every now and again they're in Sydney, and I mean Don Price, Mark Cross, Sven Peters, when those guys say
Yeah.
we'd like to come and talk, then we just get inundated with people who want to come and listen.
And
And
there's a new
so,
building coming soon. No,
sorry, Alex.
there's a new building coming soon from Atlassian.
Yes,
A new office.
yeah, they're spending $1 billion in Redfern, which is just down the road from the city, to build the most environmental building I think Australia's ever seen, and they're quite happy if no one ever goes there. So it's it's just who they are, and so yeah. So I think really my I have to thank Tamina, who's the Atlassian community boss in the Asia Pac area. She obviously must have put in a good word for me, and must have fought for my nomination. It came straight out of the blue. I mean, I was, as I said, as the first time I'd ever been to Teams, I was actually going regardless. Um, and then that happened, and it's all happened. So I really think the award was for just all my work, trying to keep the community alive, and then building up the numbers, and
Yeah.
so that
It's
Sydney is now.
it's so hard to imagine. Like I would have thought that ground zero for Atlassian, like it would be like
You
the lead.
you would think so, and again, it's good. I mean, like I look at other events around the world, and we're up there as far as numbers are concerned. And as I said, we have 2,000 people in our charter, but if we get 120 turn up to the event, we're happy.
Yeah, and 120, that's a good number because I was at an Atlassian event. So I flew up to San Francisco, their US based at headquarters. Shady place, man. The building is the offices themselves are cool, but have you been to their San Francisco office?
I've been past it, so I've only been to San Francisco a couple of times because my son lives in Mountain View. But yeah.
So their San Francisco office has 2 doors on 2 different streets.
All right.
And when you walk in through the main door that's like on their mailing address, you're walking into like a museum of sorts.
Okay.
And there's no indicator anywhere that says Atlassian equals here. And so I was fortunate enough that I was with a buddy, Sean Doyle from Release Team, and we were like, this can't be it. And we went past it and we're like, no, this is Twitch's office, so that can't be it either. So we're like backtracking and we're like, let's just go through the museum and let's see if we can find somebody, because it's like that nobody around. And we find the security guard and we're like, is Atlassian here? And he's like, who are you guys? I'm like, well, that doesn't answer the question. I don't know if this is really the right place. I don't want to disclose information if I don't have to. Turns out there's a tiny little sign by the elevators that says Atlassian. We're in the right place. But yeah, if you come in the other way, though, through the other door, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, in Sydney, their original building is similar. The original building was 6 floors. And on the ground floor was the old Westpac Bank of New South Wales, and Bank of New South Wales, Westpac have actually left that bank, that branch. It's not used anymore, but it's a reminder of what banks used to be like. When you had 32 tellers and you had huge stone pillars, and you literally walk through that museum of a bank to an elevator with one line says Atlassian, and there's nothing at the front that says this Atlassian lives here. So it's quite similar. I understand what that is.
Yeah, as I walked into so I've been a huge fan of Google my whole life, really. Well, I guess I can't say whole life because Google. I'm older than Google, but
So mine.
I digress. I went to the Mountain View campus and fell in love with Google back in 2009, I believe is when I went. Fast forward to 2011, Google has offices in various different places, right? And so, I live in Southern California, about 350 miles south of Mountain View. And so I walked into the Irvine campus. We noticed that there was a building that said Google. My wife and I, at the time, we're still in college. We're computer science, computer engineering majors. And so we were like, hey, there's a Google office here. Let's park. So we parked at a restaurant across the street, ran across the street, and we asked the security guard, like, where's Google? And he's like, go through those double doors up the elevator. So we go through the double doors up the elevator, and we are inside of Google. No sign, no anything, and nobody's there. It was like the holidays. It was a holiday break. It was right around New Year's that we went, and there was not a soul. And so we're like kind of walking around, and not a single person. Like, yeah, inside of Google, but like nobody would like you wouldn't have known the difference because we literally went up an elevator. There was no signs anywhere until the doors open, and I was like, you're hit with the colors of Google. But it's interesting how some companies like really go all out, and other companies like don't.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
So moving on to another topic I wanted to chat with you here quickly, related to what we were talking about, right? But you said this was your first Team 24. So what were your
Yes,
expectations coming into this one?
I think really, yeah. So the big announcements are always, when I
So
watch
you
from
came in, but
afar.
like, did you make an itinerary? Like, did you have like a
Oh no,
schedule, or
I
you had
was
no idea
sort of,
what to expect?
and I had no real idea what to expect, and I hope none of my bosses actually watch this, but for what I'm about to discuss, because Glintech had just been bought by Valiantus, okay, and so Valiantus were the major sponsor. You walk in, there's a big Valiantus, and lots of people from Valiantus. Like we were purchased in March. Teams happened at the end of April, so there's been some interaction, but not a great deal of interaction. And there were people from Glintech who went over, and they went over as part of that. I went over um, really as part of the community and was willing to help out, but I didn't actually have the appropriate tag because I didn't have the right color badge, and so therefore it was limited what I could do. So, and I went with my wife, and my daughter came along, and so my daughter's 29, and so
You didn't bring your son from Mountain View
no, he
down,
didn't turn up. I mean, he was, literally 300 miles up the road. No, he wasn't coming.
and it's
So,
his own company too.
exactly. Don't go there. So anyway, we caught up with him afterwards, but yeah, so I was really, for me, it was about the community event. But again, I really wasn't across what was happening. Like I really missed the first community day. I didn't fly because we placed a holiday around the 3 days in Vegas, and we'd spent
That
some
was
time in
mistake number
Vancouver.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not 3 days; it's 5 days.
That's exactly right. And I didn't realize it was 5 days until we'd already booked all the holidays, and then I looked at the itinerary and going, "What's this stuff happening on the Monday?" Um, and because I really just looked at the keynote, thing. Oh, well, the keynote's at 3:30
On a
on
Tuesday.
Tuesday, so I turn up. midday Tuesday, you know. And so
That, my friend, is a rookie mistake. I did that
mm,
mistake for Team 23.
yes, exactly. And so yeah, I missed most of that, and so but then I went, I loved Ted Lasso. I always loved Ted Lasso. I really loved the keynote speaks. I thought they were terrific, uh, and just the Atlassian community, the Atlassian foundation, where you were stuffing teddy bears, and just the ability to talk to people who, like yourself, actually, who I've seen from afar, and to actually meet in person was terrific. And fortunately, I didn't really get I didn't get hooked into the Valiantis stand, so I wasn't there as a Valiantis employee trying to,
Do
impress
the
people with
sales stuff, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, which is not me.
it's interesting though, because then you I got to choose my words carefully because I don't want to make you feel bad, but like I've been to teams twice. Last year I went just as an attendee, and I did this. I did a very similar thing. Right, I flew in at midday on the day of the keynote, checked in, wandered over, hung out for like 30 minutes till the expo opened, did the expo thing, do the keynote, ate a little bit of dinner, and went home, or went back, got a cap, right? And it's a very slow moving thing when you do that. But being a community leader this year, like the party starts since Sunday.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
get that.
you're like, I got that now. And so this year, like I drove there. I intentionally drove there because I was like, I took all the equipment, and I was like, I know I was gonna come back with a bunch of swag.
Yeah,
So I did the conscious effect because I'm about 200. I think about 200 miles away from Vegas. It wasn't too bad for me. It took me like 3.5 hours, but only because I had to stop to charge twice.
fair enough. Well, look, I had a blast. I mean, the fact that I was a community leader and
What was
I
your
could
favorite
get
part?
my sorry.
What was your favorite part of the whole event?
It's a good question, actually. I really, as I said,
I like all of it.
I really enjoyed the AI talk, and I love Ted Lasso and Coach Beard as well. Um, but I got to, I attended a meeting with Canva, who I was doing some work for as a client, and we got to meet the data manager guys as well. That was pretty cool. But and Bash was like, I'm 61 years of age, and so I
You
went with
don't
I
have to
took
say
my
over 50. You look really young.
thank you. But again, because my daughter was there and she's 29 again, and I was able to get them free passes to team. So Katie came along to the center and things like that. So that was terrific. The fact that I could actually have my family there um, made it so much different, because if I was there with Valiantis and I was only there with workmates, then you'd be constantly with your workmates, which is not a
Right.
bad thing. But what it's like, what are we doing for breakfast? What are we meeting? What are we doing, etc. It's a totally different experience. When you're there with your family, it's just like part of a holiday, and
Yeah.
it really was just
I had a very similar sentiment because I took my wife and the kids.
yeah.
But my kids are tiny. Mine are 7 and 12.
Okay.
So my wife went into the conference every once in a while just to help me out with stuff, but we got our pass to get in. But it was different, right? Because like you said, the evenings and stuff. When I wasn't doing an event, like I was with the kids, like we went out to see the Sphere. We went out to this is weird, crazy place called like it's an Area 51 like
Oh, really?
UFO aliens thing, but it's like a whole themed area, and inside of that there's like a building, and there's this thing's called Omega Mart. It's a store, and it's like
Okay.
a make believe store, except they actually sell real products, but all the products are like bogus products. But if you're careful as you're exploring the store, you will find that when you open the refrigerator to like grab a soda or a pop, whatever however you call it on your side of the world, there is no sodas, but rather a tunnel that you can go through. And when you go through
Oh,
it, you're in this like ultra immersive like sensory stimulated overload environment with all kinds of activities and just all this just interesting stuff. And so we did that for like 2 hours.
yeah, no, it sounds awesome. But yeah, that reminds me. I don't think I went outside for the first 24 hours. I seriously
That's a
don't think I'd
common
actually
thing.
stepped outside the building. It was like the closest I got to sunshine was the Venetian gondolas. Um, and yeah,
The inside ones too, right?
yeah, that's right. They weren't outside either. So
Not even the outside ones.
it's because it's just so huge. Yeah, so but no, I really had a great time, and I was glad I was able to, again, I've been to conferences before where you're by yourself and it's really just a work thing, and it's nowhere near as much fun.
Right. That's cool, and I'm glad that you were able to experience that, not only just for the first time, but also with your family. I think that's it's a different way. I wish more events were like more family friendly.
Yeah, that'd be
Because
totally different.
like Atlassian for my wife and I and my kids, like it is a huge part of our lives.
Yeah,
Like my wife edits all the videos. She helps me with every aspect of the business that I have here. And so Atlassian naturally is a big part of her life. But I also homeschool the kids, right? And so
okay,
my kids
yeah,
and my kids help out with the business as well. So like them and the word Jira and Atlassian, like they associate it so much. Because them even at that young age, like it's how they eat. If it wasn't for Atlassian, we wouldn't be being fed right now. Um, but yeah, it'd be so much interesting. Like I kind of feel bad. I feel very maybe it's the world I came from. I came from the military world, and family like was a big no-no in the workplace. Like you couldn't bring your family
yeah,
because it's government secrets and whatnot. And
yeah.
so we always grew up with like nobody can know what you do, nobody can know where you work, how you work, where you work, when you work. Very ultra secretive. And so subconsciously, like when I go to the ACE events, um, I travel with my family. So I'm like, I'm just gonna sneak you guys in. Hopefully nobody says anything.
Well, it's funny not funny you mentioned that, but the fact that you know in the military, you're not allowed to actually, share knowledge whatsoever. Where I find Atlassian in the community, it's all about sharing knowledge. It's all about you know trying to help other people and solve other people's problems and get them to help you solve yours and things like that. There's just no real barriers to hoarding knowledge like we used to in the old days. In the old days, you would, you know, the amount of money you got paid was basically depending on how much you learned and how value you were to the company, and so people tended to hoard knowledge. That if you had more knowledge, then you'd actually be worth more. I don't. Last thing I find that's completely the opposite. That they're more than happy to share as much as they possibly can, and the community, the Slack channels on community and the community site are all about, solving, helping other people solve their challenges. Which I love about it.
When you started your journey with Atlassian, was it 10 years ago at least?
Oh yeah, it would have been. Yeah, it was seriously like I went to. It was nearly 2005 when 2007. I actually went to their user group meeting at their very first offices in Sussex Street in the city, when they were literally about 30 people. Um, and so that's how long I've been involved. I'm not involved, but I've known of Atlassian because they're Australian. I mean, they're an Australian success story. Everyone knows Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar. Everyone. It's just yeah.
It's yeah, there's not a lot of like high profile Sydney based
No,
stories like that.
no,
Like
absolutely not.
if it was Silicon Valley, I mean,
Yeah,
you're almost like ashamed if you don't if you aren't a success story because it's expected that you are a success story there. But yeah, no, that's super interesting. But anyway, the question I was going with is though, in these 20-ish years, did you ever imagine that you'd be at this level of involvement and this level of certification and being a leader and putting this much of a dent in the Atlassian community?
no is a short answer to that. It was always like I was an IT manager. I mean, how boring is that? I mean, you've got, you look after people, which is great, but you're not. Yeah, you really your life is very boxed. It's very incubated into the the world that you're in, which is very small, and being made redundant at the ripe old age of, I think I was just about to turn 61, is going, well, I don't feel like I want to retire just yet. So, and I thought, well, why not? I'll just ring up Atlassian Partners and see if they'll hire me. And they did, which, because I guess one thing I can bring to a consultancy like that is I've got 20 years of IT operational management experience. I mean, I know how IT departments run. I can have conversations with CIOs. I can have conversations with leaders in IT. I can understand what they're going through. I'm not a consultant who's just was a developer and then all of a sudden, turns up and is trying to solve business problems, because that's I just don't have the experience I have. And so I was able to trade my experience for, certifications. And you're right, Alex. My Atlassian exposure has gone through the roof in the last 12 months. It's just been like my LinkedIn profile has gone from 30 or 40 people who want to talk to me to 900 people who think I'm interesting, which is just to me it's just a little
Wait until this
mind
video gets
blowing.
published.
It's just a little mind blowing. And so, but it's wonderful because you're all of a sudden you just well, like I'm sitting here talking to you. I mean, seriously. um 12 8 months ago, you were the guy on the other end of the screen who was teaching me how to do Jira permissions properly and how to do schemas and things like that. And so just the community and the award and the connections through Teams has again just allowed me to expand my world.
Yeah, that Slack channel that we're a part of is definitely enables a lot.
Yeah, it does. It does. It just brings people together. And it's just, I did not know, Alex. Like 12 months ago, 15 months ago, I was happily simply going through the motions, doing my job, doing it well. But I was quite happy just to keep doing that for 5 or 6 years, get paid, take the money, and retire off into the sunset. But now it's a case of, you know, I actually get to go out and help people solve problems, which I've always enjoyed. I mean, I've always loved coaching people and mentoring people.
Yeah.
Um,
It's an interesting one thing that you said was very interesting that stood out to me was because of your vast years of IT knowledge, right? I always tell people like the Jira administrative side of the house, that's the easy part. Right? Like that part's more trivial. Like I can teach anybody how to add a status to a workflow. That my 7-year-old does it right now. But that real world, like, should you add a status to a workflow? Should you do this? Is this the right thing? Like, you just can't teach that. That has to
no,
come from experience. It has to come from like trials and tribulations, and
yeah,
to have like someone like you available, or at least on that roster for your company, like that's got to be so invaluable because the amount of lessons learned that are in your head, right?
exactly.
You should. Why don't you have a channel talking about IT lessons learned?
Well, I guess I just haven't actually, I may do eventually. It may be something that I will do, in the future. But again, from where I've come from to where I currently am, there's such a different space that I guess it's confidence. I guess it's just having, having the confidence to do so.
You got the jacket though. That's all
I
confidence
do
you
have
need.
the check. I do have the check. Okay, but again, that's the to go back to your point. That's the difference between being able to learn stuff, but not to be able to apply it. So I can, having the jacket is shows that I can study well, and I do have knowledge around this. But then to be able to apply it to a business situation, because every business we walk into is different, and to actually, and I say this to my consultants, um, you need to understand. You need to put yourself in their shoes. You need to understand what they're telling you. You can't go in with your I'm an IT guy and this is what I'm doing. You must understand what they're trying to solve, and that's really you know terrific because I hear them. I can hear the business on the other side of the table talking to me. And I go, yeah, I've been through that 5 years ago. This is what we did. Um, that's just that you can't beat that experience.
Yeah. No, and again, just super invaluable because you keep saying like this whole like the certification part, right? Like again, common knowledge, but there's just so I pride in telling people I take your business English problems and turn them into Jira like solutions, right? Because I really do think it's a skill, it's a gift almost that because I've seen so many admins, so many Jira admins that a business person will say, "Hey, we want to be able to track this X, Y, Z," and a Jira admin just goes and goes, "Here you go. Here's X, Y, Z." But not once do you go, "Is X, Y, Z the right thing? Like, should you do X, Y, Z? Like, have you thought about this? Like, what about that? Like, why do you want that?" Like today, somebody was like, they asked me for a dashboard and then said, "I want, we're using custom charts for Jira, and they're like, I want a simple search gadget." I'm like, "Cool. Here's how you put it on there." But they already had an existing dashboard. They're already pulling metrics. And my question was like, "Well, what do you need the gadget for if you already have your predetermined data?" And they're like, "Oh, I just thought I needed a gadget." I'm like, "Well, so just because you think you need one doesn't mean you need one." So, like, but like that level of discovery, right? Like a lot of admins would just like check the checkbox and go, "Okay, you
Yeah,
want a custom field? Here's your custom field. You want another custom field that's also priority? Here's another custom field. So we have 5 priority custom fields, right?
yes, and then you end up with, yeah, what they
5
call it,
priority custom fields that all do the same thing.
a Juzilla, or whatever they call it. Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
a
so I
thousand
think
custom fields.
honestly think that that's the hardest part, and I wish there was a certification for that.
It's a good call. Yeah,
One of
indeed.
my goals, one of my goals with my content that I'm trying to do, I haven't been able to cleverly figure out how to do this, but I want to do some sort of like an immersion program, some sort of like a real world hands-on. You don't learn Jira just by mistake, but like you learn it by using it the way it's intended to be used, and you're following along a real world example as close as possible. I have a few ideas, but stay tuned.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Coming up with solutions and solving real world problems. That's what it's there for. I mean,
Right.
and that's why I'm really, really happy right now that I can get to do that.
Yeah, no, that's it's super awesome. I think it's got to be very rewarding, and and you are really a huge inspiration, right? For, to again to be tossed in within the last 12 months, right, and really go for like 5 to 100, right? It's not for the faint of heart, right? Like you really gotta want this, I think, to do what you've done here.
Yeah. Well, look, I've always been an Atlassian, fan, flag waver. And it's because my, as I said, my son started working there in 2015, 2016.
Was he
But
always
I was,
based out of the U.S. or was he ever in
no, he
Sydney?
was based in Sydney, and yeah, much to his mother's chagrin, he moved to the US in 2019. He's been there ever since. So,
Yeah,
um,
we had a buddy, Jan Schumacher. I don't know, Schumacher. I told him one day I'm gonna get his name right. He was like employee number 13. I don't know if you've met him.
oh no, I haven't. No.
Yeah, he's a very he's a friend of not this. He is a friend of Ape Tech, but he's more of a friend of the Jira Life. Like he was one of the very first guests that we had on there, and so he holds a very special place in my heart. And we're constantly like talking and stuff. And he did a similar thing. So he's based out of Sydney. So he, again, employee number 13 was there at the very, very beginning. But at one point in his career, like they shipped him over to San Francisco to kind of stand up everything over there.
Oh, yeah.
And so he had a similar role or similar situation where was based out of Australia, but then moved to the US to work for a bit. Now interesting that your son went to the Mountain View office and not the SF office. But I hate
Yeah.
SF. I'll take Mountain View any day.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I'm not sure why that was the case, but yeah,
Did he
because he
feel like
was
he took
never.
a pay cut going there?
No, that's like Nick's a back office guy. He works in Micros. He works in platform as a service. I mean, he does all the Micros stuff, and always has ever since he sort of came out of the
Interesting.
Atlassian initiation, and so he's not a Confluence guy. He doesn't care about drop down boxes on the front of the screen. He doesn't care if it looks pretty. It's just all about what's it called, audit, authorization, authentication, and yeah. So he's a platform person, just cuts code.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Where was I going to go with this? The fact that he that he's in that Bay Area is interesting, right?
Oh yeah, we could
I
talk
got
for an hour on that alone.
yeah, I know, right? I got a job at Google about a year and a half ago, almost actually 2 years to the date now, and even with their salary package, just the relocation to LA, because I used to live in San Diego, and this was for me to move from San Diego to LA, and not even LA, but like bougie LA, because Google's offices are like way on the other side of LA. And so I told my wife, I'm like, we're gonna be poor if we do this. We're gonna be very poor. So we ended up skipping. We ended up passing on the dream job, and not a day I don't regret it.
Wow.
I just didn't want to be poor. It was going to
Yeah,
be
I
a very
understand that. I
interesting
mean, it
change.
is. Yeah, but Nick doesn't have a family. Okay, he does have a partner. He doesn't have a family, so he doesn't have kids. He doesn't have those sorts of pressures, and he, up until very recently, he didn't really want to go out much. So he just didn't spend his coin.
Low cost of
So,
living, yeah. I got 2 mouths to feed. That's always another worry, right? Like when you do have a family, like you're a little less risky. Want to take less risk, right? Because something goes wrong, those 2 kids,
yeah,
man,
that's right.
they know how to
Yeah,
clean out a
exactly.
kitchen in an hour. Well, anyways, Mark, we are getting here towards the end of this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time of your Thursday, right?
You're right. It is. No, I've had a
It is.
wonderful time, Alex.
I
Thank you for inviting me.
I can't wait to. Hopefully, you're coming next year.
I want to go to Disneyland. I've never been to Disneyland either.
No.
So yeah.
Well, I'm trying to organize a tour because I've been to Disneyland, I don't know, 100, 150 times.
Wow.
I
Down
don't
the
know if
road.
you've seen the post, right? But I live like 3 minutes away.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a little spoiled in that respect. So I'm trying to plan something out because it's one thing to go to Disney, but it's one thing to go to Disney with like somebody who's been there
Yes.
a
Yeah.
lot. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Atlassian just buys out. Like maybe not
Yeah.
Disneyland. I think Disneyland would be too expensive, but maybe California Adventure. I'm hoping they buy it out because it's not unheard of. A lot of businesses they'll do like some sort of they usually close the park around 8 p.m. and so from 8 to like midnight, 8 to 1 a.m., which is about the bash. Maybe it's an extended
I was
version
going to
of
say,
bash.
it sounds like a good reason for a bash. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that we at least get DCA. I'm hoping Atlassian they pull through with this one because I can't imagine a better bash party than
No.
down with the
No.
mouse.
Afro Jack was good, but I'd never heard of Afro Jack up until the bash.
I hadn't either. Yeah, it was So I'll give you a funny story. Have you seen Silicon Valley? I know I told you we were going to end, but have you seen Silicon Valley, the show?
No, I haven't. No.
So there's a show on HBO called Silicon Valley where they basically create this app. Right? Basically, it's the life story of living life in Silicon Valley, right? Creating an app, getting funding, and all that stuff, making money, losing money,
Yeah.
all the heartbreaks and stuff, right? And so the opening scene of that show is this somebody got funded or whatever, had a lot of money, and they had Kid Rock, the musician,
All right. Yeah.
right? And he's playing at this party, and like the net worth of that party is like $10 billion, right? Like everybody's super rich, and there's not a soul, not one soul, listening to Kid Rock, who anybody else would be like, oh my gosh, this is an American
Yeah.
rock star, right?
Yep.
And so when I went to Teams last year, they had like a dance floor. It was inside of the expo hall, but just to the side. And so the music was very loud, and they had like this dance floor, and I'm like, in the world would they give a dance floor to a bunch of nerds?
Exactly.
That was the only thing I could think of. But then it dawned on me that most of the people that go to Teams are more like on the marketing side.
That's exactly right.
So maybe it's not as nerdy as I thought, but I was pleasantly surprised to see the amount of people out there dancing
Yes.
around to Afro
That was
Jack
great.
or whatever his name was. But I
It
was like,
was. It
I
was
was
great.
indifferent. I was like, can you guys just turn it down a little bit? I can't talk.
Thank you, Alex. It's been
That nerd life is
really
a little bit
enjoyable.
different. Well, thank you again, Mark. I appreciate you, and hopefully we run into each other next year.
Cheers. Look forward to it.